I never thought that a wedding invitation would end up being a public shaming. I arrived at the St. Julian Hotel in Charleston with my heels sore from the 8-hour megabus ride, and just as I stepped into the ballroom and greeted the bride with a soft, "Hello, sweetheart," she slapped me across the face and sneered, "Staff should stay invisible. Just pour the champagne," while the photographer, waiter, and my banker friend Clarice all witnessed it. The stemless flute in my hand tilted, and the champagne spilled cold down my wrist. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not yet. The room spun, not from the slap, but from how quick it had all turned. Just that morning, I had steamed the lavender dress I'd saved from Macy's clearance rack, the one with lace sleeves that made me feel covered but still elegant. I'd pressed my hair, painted my nails a soft mauve, and printed out the digital invitation, because I never got a real one. But I showed up. Because Deshawn is my only child. Because I believed some bridges can't burn all the way. Kayla's voice cut sharp through the air again. "Can someone tell her the kitchen is through the back?" I wasn't in uniform. I was wearing pearls. But no one corrected her. Not Deshawn, who stood frozen 3 feet away. Not her mother, who laughed like it was a skit. Not even the woman I'd trained at the post office, who looked at her shoes. The only person who stepped forward was Clarice, who set her wineglass down hard and whispered, "You don't have to take this." I nodded like I heard her, but I was somewhere else. The slap had unlocked a hallway of memory. The housewarming gifts ignored, the one-sided texts, the way my name never made it to their registry. It all added up in that moment like a back-owed debt. And I realized I was the fool who kept paying. The MC asked everyone to be seated. I walked out instead. My cheeks burned, but not from shame, from clarity. I knew what I had to do next. I still had the townhouse deed in my purse. "My name is Rochelle Denise Grant. I'm 62, retired USPS supervisor from Savannah, and this wedding moment came after 6 months of silence from my son Deshawn, since he started living with Kayla on Queen Street. Right after I deeded them the townhouse I bought for $248,000 in cash. I didn't hand them keys. I handed them a foundation. The property was clean, paid in full, no mortgage, no liens. 3 bedrooms, freshly painted trim, walkable to the park. I'd bought it with my early retirement check and the savings I'd tucked away since before Deshawn was born. I told myself it was legacy. I had no other children. Deshawn had no siblings to share with, no cousins close by. He was my son, but I'd also raised him like a partner, like someone who understood what that house cost me. But after the deed was notarized, they changed the locks without telling me. I only found out when I tried to drop off groceries one weekend, bags sweating in the back seat, and my key no longer worked. A note taped to the door read, "Please respect our privacy." That was 2 weeks after closing. Clarice had warned me. She sat across from me at the notary's office and said, "Make sure the trust has boundaries, Rochelle." But I brushed her off. I thought love meant no paperwork between us. I thought if you raised a child with dignity, they'd know how to return it. The silence started slow. Missed calls, delayed texts, excuses. We've been busy. Kayla's been anxious. Planning the wedding is taking up our weekends. I held on. I excused it. I told my church ladies he was just adjusting to married life, even though the wedding hadn't happened yet. Then one night in May, I drove by the house after Wednesday service. The porch lights were strung with paper lanterns. Kayla's family was gathered on the steps, laughing, eating barbecue. A big welcome home banner in cursive across the garage. I parked across the street and waited for someone to notice me. They never did. That's when I understood I hadn't been invited. Not to the porch, not to their future, not even as a guest. Looking back, Deshawn skipped Mother's Day. Kayla never returned my messages, and when I sent handmade curtains for their guest room, they posted them online calling them dated thrift store rejects. But it was Kayla's slap at the wedding, followed by her fake laugh when someone said I looked confused for the help, that finally broke me. I'd sewn those curtains myself. Heavy beige linen with embroidered corners, tailored to fit the measurements Kayla had emailed me back in January, back when she still signed her notes, "Love Kay." I shipped them priority mail with tracking. The photo they posted showed the box half opened on the floor, the fabric crumpled like laundry, captioned, "When your fiancé as mom tries to thrift flip your home." I read the comments. Laughing emojis. One of her friends wrote, "The 70s called, they want their drapes back." Deshawn liked it. I didn't respond. I took a walk around the block instead. I remember brushing past my neighbor, Mr. Curtis, watering his hydrangeas. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. That was a lie. I hadn't cried, but something settled in me that day, like wet concrete before it hardens. Then came Mother's Day. No card, no call, just silence, and a photo of Kayla and her mom posted with the caption, "My everything, #generational blessings." I zoomed in. Deshawn was in the background, grilling, wearing the apron I'd embroidered for him last Christmas. The one with soul-fed Sundays stitched across the chest. Still, I told myself it was a phase, that after the wedding, things would ease up. I even brought a small gift that day, a custom serving tray etched with their initials. It never left my tote bag. After the slap, after the laughter, after the photographer lowered his camera and turned away like I'd embarrassed him, I walked right out of that ballroom and into the hotel lobby bathroom, locked the door, and sat down on the tiled floor. I didn't cry. I just sat there holding the tray in my lap, running my fingers over the letters. R+D. The R didn't stand for Kayla. My church sister and longtime friend Bernice pulled me aside outside the restroom, dabbed my cheek with a tissue, and said, "Rochelle, don't you dare let them treat you like lint. Tell me everything." I had just come out of the stall, face still stiff, trying to pull myself together under those harsh hotel lights. Bernice was waiting by the sinks like she'd been standing guard. She didn't ask if I was all right. She could see I wasn't. She reached into that big leather purse she always carried and handed me a fresh tissue. I took it, but my hands were shaking too much to dab the red from my face. She did it for me. Soft. No judgment. Just calm, steady care. I opened my mouth, and the words came like floodwater. I told her about the gift deed, about the $248,000 house I'd bought outright, the closing costs I covered, the furniture I paid for out of my pension. I told her about the curtains, the locked door, the barbecue they held while I sat across the street like a stranger. I told her about Mother's Day and how I made excuses for Deshawn, just like I always had, even when he forgot my birthday, even when he skipped my retirement dinner, even when he started calling me Rochelle instead of Mama. Bernice didn't flinch. She listened like every detail mattered. "Baby," she said, "they didn't just take your generosity. They tried to erase you from it." She squeezed my hand. "And now they're mad you showed up. You upset the story they're trying to sell." I looked down at my dress, still damp from the champagne. I hadn't even noticed the stain near the hem. I suddenly felt foolish, like I'd shown up to a test I was never meant to pass. "I just wanted to witness my son's wedding," I said. Bernice's jaw tightened. "And they wanted you to serve at it." She pulled out her phone. "You got your documents with you?" I nodded. "Good. First thing Monday, we go to Clarice. This isn't over. Not by a damn long shot." I told Bernice how I paid for their closing costs, $6,300, furnished the living room with my retirement check, $4, $700, and even bought them a washer-dryer combo, $1,199, because Deshawn said Kayla had delicate taste, and I had trusted her simply because he loved her. We were still in the restroom hallway, tucked near the back exit where the banquet servers passed quietly with empty trays. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder labeled "For Deshawn's Future," and showed Bernice the receipts. She scrolled without saying a word, her finger moving slower the longer she read. The furniture invoice from Haverty's, the appliance order with rush delivery, the wire transfer breakdown from South Shore. All of it. Itemized, paid in full, sent without conditions. I didn't ask for thanks. I thought being family was enough. Back in February, Deshawn told me Kayla had a sensitivity to chemical textures. I didn't know what that meant, but I nodded and told him I'd handle it. I found an eco-certified couch set, double-wrapped for dust protection, and arranged for white glove delivery. I even bought eucalyptus oil for the diffuser she'd once mentioned offhand. It arrived in a gift box with a note, "For peaceful evenings." I never got a reply. When I showed Bernice the text from Deshawn asking for help with their registry gap, she squinted. "This one?" she asked. where he sent you 3 Amazon links and said, "Just pick one. We're busy?" I nodded. I'd picked all 3. "What do they do with their own money?" she asked. "Kayla's a brand consultant," I said. "Deshaun hasn't worked steady since the property closed." She shook her head. "You know what that is, right?" "That's not marriage. That's sponsorship." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. I'd been telling myself I was helping my son build his life, but what I'd really done was fund my own replacement. They didn't need me anymore. Not as a mother. Not as a witness. Just as a wallet. Bernice closed my phone gently and looked me dead in the eye. "You have receipts, Rochelle. Now it's time to use them." The first red flag I ignored was last Christmas, when I dropped off a handmade quilt and Kayla texted Deshaun, "Tell your mom to stop bringing dusty heirlooms. We're curating a minimalist vibe." And he never defended me. I had stayed up late for 3 weeks sewing that quilt, using fabric pieces I'd collected since Deshaun was little, his old baby blanket, strips from my USPS uniform shirt, a square from the apron his grandmother wore when she taught me to make sweet potato pie. Every stitch meant something. I wrapped it in brown paper, tied it with a satin ribbon, and left it on their porch on December 23rd with a note. "For warmth in every season. Love, Mama." No response on Christmas. Not even a "thanks." But 2 days later, I saw the text. Deshaun had left his iPad open when I visited to drop off his late grandfather's tools. I wasn't snooping, just looking for the bathroom when I glanced at the screen. Kayla's message popped up first, followed by his reply. "LOL, I know. She means well." That silence, his silence, cut deeper than the insult. I didn't expect Kayla to understand what that quilt meant. But Deshaun? He'd grown up wrapped in those same colors, that same thread. He used to call my quilts soft armor, and now he let someone call them clutter. I carried that moment around like a bruise. Quiet. Tender. I told myself it didn't matter, that love didn't need recognition. But the lie started to unravel. They never invited me to New Year's brunch. Never thanked me for the cookware set I sent from Macy's. When I texted a photo of my collard greens on MLK Day, Kayla replied with a link to a vegan blog and a comment, "We're cleansing now, no offense." Bernice had warned me again. They're not just distancing, Rochelle. They're deleting, one memory at a time. I didn't want to believe it. But that quilt, folded neatly in their hall closet untouched, told the truth. They didn't throw it away. That would have taken conviction. No, they buried it. Just like they buried me. In March, Kayla sent me a Venmo request for $120 for a family brunch I wasn't even invited to, and when I declined it, Deshaun texted, "Just pay it. She's under stress planning the wedding." At first, I thought it was a mistake. The notification buzzed while I was getting my oil changed. $120 from Kayla J. Sparkles with the message, "Your share of Sunday Fam Brunch XO." I stared at it for a long time before closing the app. That brunch had happened the day before. I'd seen the pictures on Instagram. Kayla's mother, 2 of her aunts, a few friends from Charlotte, all posing in front of mimosas and a charcuterie board. Deshaun was there too, in a linen shirt I'd bought him for his college internship. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't there, but somehow I was expected to fund it. I didn't pay. I sat with it for a few hours, then hit decline and went about my errands. An hour later, Deshaun's message arrived. "Just pay it. She's under a lot of pressure right now." No hi, no explanation, no sense that what was happening was out of line. Just an order. Like I was part of a budget spreadsheet, not his mother. I typed out 3 different replies, one with all caps, one with a long explanation, one with just a question mark. I deleted them all. Instead, I sent nothing. That silence was the first true boundary I laid, and it burned because I'd spent years being the fallback, the one who filled in the gaps without being asked. Rent short? I covered it. Car trouble? I was there. But now I was being billed like a stranger at a group dinner. Later that night, I got a follow-up from Kayla. Didn't mean to offend. Just trying to include you in our shared costs. Wedding planning is overwhelming. There was no apology, just a passive rewrite of the facts. They weren't excluding me. They were giving me the opportunity to contribute. I screenshotted it, labeled it Brunch Bill March. Then I created a new folder on my desktop entitled Transactions. It had its first resident. 2 weeks before the wedding, my RSVP went unacknowledged, and my hotel room mysteriously got canceled without refund, $198, while Deshawn wrote in a group chat, "Can someone handle my mom? She's stressing K out." The first sign was silence. I had mailed back the RSVP card 3 days after receiving it. No note inside, just the checked box for "joyfully accepts" and my name written neatly on the line. No response. No confirmation. I emailed the planner listed at the bottom of the invite, someone named Ainsley, and got an auto reply saying they were fully immersed in final event prep. When I called the hotel to confirm my reservation, the front desk manager told me it had been canceled. Not by them. Not by me. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, tapping her keyboard, "but it looks like the wedding block coordinator removed your name from the group." No explanation, no refund. I forwarded the cancellation email to Deshawn. No reply. 10 minutes later, Clarice texted me a screenshot from the wedding planning group chat she was still accidentally part of. There it was, plain as day. Deshawn. "Can someone handle my mom? She's stressing K out." Ainsley. "Thought we took care of that." Kayla. "She'll be fine. She always finds a way to make herself the center." I didn't cry. I printed the screenshot, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my purse with the RSVP copy and the refund denial. That purse was starting to feel more like a file cabinet. Bernice offered me her sister's condo in North Charleston for the weekend. "It's got a pull-out and a kettle," she said. "What else do we need?" I packed my lavender dress, the custom tray, a new pair of stockings, and the worn folder with all the receipts. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but something told me to keep it close. They had disinvited me without saying the words, but they had also underestimated how quietly a mother can prepare for war. After the slap, I stood frozen with champagne trickling down my arm while Kayla's aunt whispered, "They said she was some kind of house manager." And the MC corrected, "No, ma'am, that's the groom's mother," causing gasps and sudden silence, but nobody apologized. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't run. I stood there, holding the stemless glass like it might explain itself. My arm was wet, my cheek pulsing. But what I felt most was heat crawling up the back of my neck. A different kind of heat, shame mixed with clarity. The kind that burns through fantasy and leaves only fact. Across the room, Deshawn was whispering to Kayla while guests glanced between us like they weren't sure who was ruining the moment. One woman tilted her head at me with a confused squint, like she'd just recognized me from somewhere she didn't expect. Maybe the grocery store, maybe the background of a life she thought belonged to someone else. I watched as Kayla's aunt leaned toward a server and muttered something. Then I heard it. They said she was some kind of house manager. And then the MC, bless him, whoever he was, cleared his throat and said into the mic, "Correction, folks, that's the groom's mother." Gasps. A beat of stillness. Then a few hands dropped their phones. The DJ started playing something upbeat to cover the tension. Deshawn still hadn't looked at me. Kayla fake laughed. No one moved to check on me. No one said sorry. I walked slowly toward the exit, each step sinking into the plush carpet like I was being swallowed whole. One of the servers stepped aside to let me pass. She was young, maybe 22, and for a second our eyes met. She looked at me with something close to apology. I nodded, not for her, but for myself. I had finally arrived at the truth. They didn't just fail to honor me. They erased me, repackaged me, and invited me back as background. But I'd kept the receipts. And I had the deed. They'd built their little empire on a house I still legally owned. That night, back at Bernice's sister's condo, I stared at the mortgage deed I'd kept in my purse and decided I would no longer fund disrespect, no matter who it came from, not even Deshawn. I sat at the kitchen table with my shoes off and a mug of lukewarm tea untouched. The dress I'd ironed so carefully now had a sticky smear down the front from the champagne. I didn't bother to change. I just kept rereading the deed, my name typed in bold above Deshawn's, Rochelle D. Grant, grantor and trustee. The living trust was revocable. I had left that clause in on purpose, just in case life turned left. I never thought I'd need it. But there it was, my safety net. Bernice was in the guest room, on the phone with Clarice, whispering updates in between sips of ginger ale. I heard words like reversible, unrecorded transfer, and still in her name. She was moving quicker than me. But I needed that stillness first. I needed to sit with what I'd let happen. I had raised a child who saw me as a convenience, who let a woman strike me in public and didn't lift a finger, who let people think I was staff at his own wedding and stayed quiet when they humiliated me. No more blaming Kayla. Deshawn had chosen silence again and again, and silence is an answer. I reached into my purse, pulled out the plastic envelope with the deed, and slid it across the table. It made a low hiss against the laminate. That house was never theirs. It was mine, legally, financially, and morally. I hadn't given it out of obligation. I gave it as a legacy, and they had treated it like a free sample. At 11:42 p.m., I opened my laptop, signed into the trust portal Clarice had helped me set up last fall, and submitted a digital revocation request. A confirmation pinged instantly. Request acknowledged. Please allow 1 to 2 business days for processing. I took a photo of the screen, saved it to a new folder labeled Restoration in Progress. First thing Monday, I met with Clarice at South Shore Credit Union, revoked the gift transfer by invoking the Revocable Living Trust Clause, and scheduled the listing of the townhouse at $289,000, notifying the tenants, my son and Kayla, by certified mail. The bank's automatic doors opened with a hiss I didn't wait to hear. Clarice was already inside, hair pulled tight, reading over the trust documents I'd emailed her last night. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. We got to work without pleasantries. She flagged the key clause, the one that allowed the trustee, me, to reverse any unrecorded distribution. Since I had retained ownership in the trust, and the deed had never been formally filed in Deshawn's name, the path was clear. "This will sting," Clarice warned, "but it'll hold." I signed 3 forms: revocation notice, updated trustee declaration, and the intent to sell. She added them to the bank's record with a timestamp, 9:14 a.m. Eastern. Legal standing restored. I called South Coast Realty from the parking lot. The line picked up before the second ring. Malcolm Green, the agent Bernice recommended, walked me through the process. "Market's tight," he said. "We list it right, you'll get offers by Friday." I gave him the lockbox code and the address. "One condition," I added, "no advance warning. They find out when they get the letter." He paused a beat, then said, "Understood." We drove to the post office next. I stood at the counter, filled out 2 certified mail slips, one for Deshawn, one for Kayla. The woman behind the glass didn't know she was witnessing a turning point, but I did. When the stamp hit the receipt, I felt something shift. Not joy, not revenge, just balance. Clarice handed me copies for my file. "Next step is giving them notice. You're within your rights, but prepare for backlash." I looked her dead in the face. I lived 40 years waiting to be respected. I'll survive 2 weeks of whining. By 11:20 a.m., the mail was en route, the house was in listing prep, and I was no longer the silent sponsor. I was the owner, reclaiming her property and her peace. I backed up every invoice, gift receipt, and Zelle record into a password-protected Google Drive folder labeled Grant House Contributions, including screenshots of the group chat where Kayla called me extra baggage. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to document. That Sunday night, while the house listing went live, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, organizing 5 years of digital proof. I pulled receipts from old emails, Wayfair for the love seat, Home Depot for the blinds, a boutique Kayla liked in Atlanta where I'd bought those sustainably sourced throw pillows. The total cleared $13,000 before I even opened the bank statements. Zelle logs showed direct transfers labeled Deshawn, moving costs, Kayla, wedding florist advance, and Queen Street paint job. I cross-referenced each with dates, then uploaded PDFs with file names that told a full story. No fluff, just timestamps and transactions. I wanted it courtroom clear. The group chat screenshots were harder to revisit. Clarice had forwarded them from her exit out of the planning thread. One read, Kayla, we're gonna need a script if she shows up again. She always plays victim. Such extra baggage. Deshawn replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. I clipped it, saved it as baggage_internal-messaging.jpg, and added it to the drive. If they wanted to act confused later, fine. I had a folder that spoke louder than any apology they were too proud to offer. When I finished, I shared the drive with 3 people: Clarice, Bernice, and Mia Jenkins, Clarice's cousin and a probate attorney, who agreed to consult if things turned ugly. I also printed a hard copy of the summary table, date, amount, item, outcome, and placed it in a blue binder labeled Disputed Assets Grant versus Grant. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the pattern, about how slowly dignity erodes when you hand it over in installments, and how rarely you notice the loss until someone calls you furniture. By midnight, the folder was backed up, shared, time-stamped, and notarized with a digital seal. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and for the first time in months, slept straight through. Bernice helped alert Pastor Linwood at Bethel AME. Clarice contacted her lawyer cousin Mia Jenkins to confirm legal standing, and I asked my godson Malcolm, who works maintenance, to prep the house for staging. By Tuesday, I had a plan with legs. Bernice made the first call, speaking to Pastor Linwood just after morning prayer. She kept it plain. Kayla slapped Rochelle at her own son's wedding. Deshawn stood by. She gave them the house. Now she's taking it back. She said there was a long pause. Then, tell Rochelle she's not alone and will make space if she needs to speak. Clarice looped in Mia Jenkins that same afternoon. Mia read through the trust revocation and asset file I'd compiled, then sent back a crisp email. Your legal position is sound. Possession and title still rest with you. Proceed with notice and documentation. I'll step in if they contest. No hemming, no hedging, just clarity. I printed it and slid it behind the deed in my binder. Then I called Malcolm. He was my best friend's son, 35, single father, sharp with tools and timing. I need the house photo ready by next Friday, I said. Can you do it? He didn't hesitate. I'm on lunch break now. I'll swing by before they get home. By 4 p.m., he'd already replaced the busted porch light, capped a leaking spigot, and sent me 10 photos of the front walk power washed clean. They're still living there, I said. Don't make a scene. I'm quiet, he replied, but I don't tiptoe. The house I once filled with promise was now a project on a clock. The real estate listing went up that night with interior shots from before they moved in. My furniture, my paint colors, my setup. I made sure the caption read, Property held in trust by original owner. No tenant claims to title. I told Bernice I felt like I was building my own case from scratch. She corrected me. No, baby, you're unbuilding theirs. By sundown, I had legal confirmation, pastoral backing, a skilled pair of hands on site, and a timeline to work with. 10 days to reclaim what was mine. On Friday, I emailed Deshawn and Kayla a formal 30-day vacate notice, attached the scanned trust agreement, and stated, as the home was never titled to you individually, your residency ends December 1st. Further communication will be through legal counsel. The message wasn't long. I kept it tight and professional. No pleas, no motherly cushioning. Just facts. The subject line read, Notice to vacate, 119 Queen Street. I double-checked the attachments. Scan deed, trust revocation, legal citation from Mia. I hit send at 9:03 a.m., then printed and mailed a physical copy by certified mail because I knew Kayla would pretend it never landed in her inbox. By noon, silence. At 3:47 p.m., Deshawn called. I let it ring. He didn't leave a voicemail. 20 minutes later, he sent a one-line email. This is a mistake. Please call me. I didn't reply. I was at Bernice's when Kayla's response came through. 9 paragraphs, 3 exclamation marks, and 1 thinly veiled threat about public embarrassment. She accused me of betrayal, said I was weaponizing generational wealth and destabilizing their household. Not once did she use the word sorry. I read it out loud to Bernice. She raised an eyebrow, then said, "They thought the house came with your silence." She was right. They never treated it like a gift. They treated it like inheritance paid early. Owed. Automatic. Theirs to decorate and disrespect. And when I finally pulled the cord, they acted like I'd robbed them. Not of shelter, but of control. At 6:12 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. It was Ainsley, the wedding planner. She stammered through a half apology and asked if we could mediate privately. I told her I wasn't interested. "Let Kayla know," I said, "I'm no longer in her cast of characters." That night, I drove by the house, porch light on. One of the succulents I bought was dying on the windowsill. Malcolm had left a note taped to the door. Pending sale. No changes to fixtures. I took a photo of the note, uploaded it to my folder. Countdown started. 28 days. Kayla posted a furious Instagram story, tagging me as, quote, "vindictive and bitter." Then Deshawn called me crying, saying, "You're ruining my marriage." But I calmly replied, "No, baby, I'm reclaiming my peace." I didn't see the post myself. Bernice's niece showed it to me during choir practice break, her phone screen bright with drama. Black background, white text in a jagged font. "Imagine being so bitter you evict your own blood. The devil wears church clothes too." Underneath it, a tag, @RochelleGrand, my full name, no privacy. A picture followed, a close-up of the eviction letter folded at the top with "Mother?" scribbled over it in red. She wanted a war of perception. She wanted people to believe I was a vengeful old woman who couldn't handle her son's independence. I let her have it. For a day. Deshawn's call came that evening. I was folding towels, the cheap ones I used for scrubbing, when his name lit up. I stared at it. Answered on the third ring. He was crying before I even said hello. "Mama," he choked out. "Please don't do this. You're ruining everything. She's breaking down." She broke me first. I said flat, "She's pregnant." I didn't react. That doesn't make the house hers. He kept going, a flood of excuses. Stress, hormones, pressure. You don't understand how hard it's been. He said I was shaming them. He said Kayla was embarrassed. He said I was making their lives impossible. I waited for him to stop, then said, "You knew she slapped me. You said nothing." He sniffed. I didn't want a scene. "And what do you think this is?" He was silent. Then, quietly, "I don't want to choose between you and her." I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just said, "You already did. Months ago." Then, before he could shift the blame again, I added, "This isn't revenge, Deshawn. This is a reset. You two built your comfort on my sacrifice and called it independence. Now I'm reclaiming what's mine." I ended the call, sat back in the chair, exhaled. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn. Routine life carried on. And for the first time, so did I. 1 week later, I attended the church's quarterly business meeting where Deshawn and Kayla had planned to announce a new joint youth program, and I quietly requested the mic before their presentation. The fellowship hall was full. Metal chairs scraped tile as folks settled in with their manila folders and bulletins. Bernice saved me a seat 2 rows from the front. I wore a navy pantsuit and flats. No jewelry, no makeup, just clarity. Pastor Linwood opened with prayer, then turned the floor over to committee reports. Deshawn and Kayla were seated together, heads down, scripts in their laps. They were set to present right after new initiatives. I stood just before their names were called. "Pastor," I said, "may I speak briefly?" He looked at me, then at Deshawn, then back to me. "Of course, Sister Rochelle." I walked to the mic with my folder in hand. No theatrics, no raised voice, just documentation. I thanked the church for their support, said I'd kept quiet too long, then held up the printed screenshots, the chat where I was called extra baggage, the planner's message about handling me, Kayla's own words. I didn't add heat. I let their words do the burning. I was invited to give, but not to belong, I said. I paid for the house. I paid for furniture, bills, even wedding expenses. But when I showed up, I was slapped and silenced. Gasps moved through the room like a breeze through dry leaves. Pastor Linwood didn't interrupt. Bernice sat straight-backed, recording with her phone held low. I ended with the deed. This is the property in question, still under my name per the trust agreement. I've issued notice, I've reclaimed title, and I share this today not for vengeance, but so no one confuses quietness for weakness ever again. Deshawn didn't look up. Kayla clutched her script, but didn't rise. I left the mic, handed the folder to the church clerk, and returned to my seat. With Bernice recording and Pastor Linwood nodding gravely, I read aloud from the deed revocation, projected the group chat screenshots on the fellowship hall screen, and said, "This is how they honored their elder judge for yourselves." The projector hummed as the first screenshot lit up the wall behind me. Kayla's text. "We'll need a script if she shows up again. She always plays victim." The room went still. Even the rustling of paper stopped. I let the silence stretch, then clicked to the next slide. Deshawn's reply. "Just a thumbs up." One symbol. Enough to tell the whole story. I didn't raise my voice. I read from the document Clarice prepared, line by line, the date of purchase, the trust terms, the clause reserving revocation rights, the formal notice served. My voice stayed level, but my hands no longer trembled. I'd told the truth to their faces. Now I was telling it to the community. "We call this place a family," I said, turning from the screen. "But sometimes, blood behaves worse than strangers. And when that happens, silence doesn't keep the peace. It feeds the problem." Someone in the back murmured, "Amen." A few heads nodded. I saw Sister Paulette lean in closer, her eyes wide. "They asked me to fund their dreams," I continued. "I did. They called it love. But when I showed up to witness the life I helped build, they stripped me of dignity, then spun a story where I was the villain. I stepped aside, letting the full projection of the trust revocation document glow behind me. This is not retaliation. This is restoration. They may have ignored my voice, but they can't ignore this. I turned off the projector, packed up the folder, and walked back to my seat without another word. Deshawn kept his eyes on the floor. Kayla sat stiff, lips pressed thin. Their youth program proposal was skipped. No one asked why. As I walked out to polite applause and Kayla fled in tears, Bernice handed me a tiny velvet box containing my old house key, returned by Pastor Linwood, who said, "This belongs to a woman who builds, not begs." I opened the box and stared at the brass key inside, the one I'd had cut the day we closed on the townhouse. I remembered how warm it felt in my palm back then, full of meaning, full of hope. Now it was just weight. Not loss, not regret, just the kind of weight you earn. Bernice looped her arm through mine as we exited the fellowship hall. Neither of us spoke until we reached the sidewalk. I looked up at the clear evening sky and let the air fill my lungs, not with relief, but with ownership. Behind me, voices buzzed low, people digesting what they'd seen, what they hadn't known. Kayla's seat was empty. Deshawn didn't come after me. He didn't say a word. That silence no longer hurt. Back at the condo, I placed the key on the kitchen table. Not as a relic, as evidence. Proof of what I gave and what I reclaimed. That house would sell. The funds would reroute into my name. But more than that, my story had aired. I had spoken. Fully, publicly, with backbone and backup. No one would ever mistake my silence for consent again.